This is SGX's first ever technology symposium, which is virtual. It is my privilege to connect with you, and this gives the opportunity for us to connect with global audience and speakers. It's really a privilege that you and I are sharing the stage today. So I'm really thoroughly excited, and with this we'll get straight into our Fireside chat, which is about Think, Transform, Trust. So as you know, Adena, COVID-19 made Think Different kind of a mantra for all our businesses around the world. So tell us more about what Nasdaq is doing to think differently in this new normal.
Well, first of all, Tinku, thank you so much for having me with you today. It's really a true pleasure to have a chance to have a conversation with you. And it is a very unique time for the entire world and the world of finance in particular. And what we are experiencing is something that I don't think any of us could have really predicted in terms of how we would have been able to manage our markets, the entire economy, frankly, in almost an entirely remote environment. And I think that as a result, we've all had to think very differently as we've gone through this year to make sure, number one, we're focusing on what's most important to the success of the business, what's most important to the safety of our employees, and what's most important to our clients' success. And I think those three things have really guided us throughout this year in terms of making sure that we focus first on getting our employees to a safe location and allowing them to continue to operate as effectively and efficiently as possible, making sure we understand our clients' priorities in terms of helping them manage through extreme volumes, different levels of demand for their services, and potential disruptions in their businesses. And then thirdly, making sure we really focus in on those projects and initiatives within Nasdaq or within all of our organizations that really are going to continue to drive our companies forward, while also recognizing that maybe not everything can get done all at once in this new environment. So I think it's been a world of change as we've gone through the year.
That brings me to the next topic, which is innovate to transform. So innovation is about thinking differently and making it happen. It is actually about turning ideas to action, and it is best described as think big, start small, act fast. So there would be a lot of things I know you can talk about innovation. So the stage is yours. Just tell us more about how Nasdaq is innovating, how companies are innovating, and how technology again, is making innovation possible.
Well, certainly, I think that every company now realizes that in order for them to succeed over the next 10 to 20 years, innovation has to become part of their core competence. And so standing still is the fastest way to become irrelevant, to be very blunt. So I think that as a result, companies in all sectors and all industries are turning to technology as a way to power innovation, to encourage innovation among their employees, but also, of course, the technologies themselves can become the innovations. So in our particular context at Nasdaq, we are a technology provider to the capital markets around the world. Not only do we leverage technology to power our own markets in the United States and across Europe, but we also provide the technology that powers 130 other markets in the world. And that technology has got to be the most advanced possible. So we are always taking the emerging technologies that are coming into the marketplace and trying to figure out how to make sure we apply them into the markets and into the market economy. So first and foremost, we have to deal with massive amounts of scale in a ultra low latency environment with up times of at least 4, 5, or 6 nines, which means extremely high resilience. And that's an engineering challenge that is fascinating, and one that we, Tinku, you are always focused on, and as are we. So there's a whole lot of technology around capacity planning, infrastructure management, as well as engineering around tuning systems in a distributed server environment to make sure that we can deliver consistent low latency experience to our clients. What we've been focused on in terms of taking that forward is really focusing on the cloud in terms of how can we leverage the scalability of the cloud and the ability for us to manage our infrastructure in a remote setting in one that also provides for the benefits of all of the IT security investments and other things that the cloud providers are really focused on, but still provide that ultra low latency, ultra high resilient, and high capacity capability. And so that's a big part of our focus, is trying to find ways to create systems and technologies that are native to the cloud that we can then look at starting to operate markets in the cloud going forward. A lot of smaller markets are being born in the cloud. They never have an on-prem type of situation, but established markets like SGX or Nasdaq, we are now looking at how do we want to re-engineer our capabilities to make the cloud a potential reality for ourselves as a market operator. So that's number one. I think the second is machine learning and the ability to leverage data in a way that we just haven't seen before. The entire financial industry is founded on the basis of data. If you didn't know what the stock price was, even back in the 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, it made it hard for you to know, how do you price your orders? How do you make sure that you're getting the right deal in the market? So data has always been the foundation of what we do, but there's so many other sources of data today in terms of alternative data, information that could drive results for different industries or sectors or companies, in addition to, of course, all of the market data that we create within our markets. And so creating a more advanced data management capability and then applying machine learning on top of that can help with defensive things that we do in terms of rooting out and preventing market manipulation, as well as offensive things that we can provide to our clients in terms of more insights and analytics that allow them to find better alpha opportunities in the market. So machine learning certainly is our second real focus. And then I think that we also are always interested in what might be coming down the road. So quantum computing is not a true reality today in a commercial sense, but you don't know that it could be something that becomes more of a reality over the next 1 to 2 decades. And while that seems like it might be far away today, putting that infrastructure in place, creating the data management capabilities, being much more sophisticated in your databases and how the relational capabilities across data really allow you then ultimately to find ways to leverage quantum in the future. So we think that that's a third area of long-term focus that all the markets should be considering as we get to a more and more efficient state. So lots to think about, a lot of technologies to apply to our space, but as of course, every industry is facing a similar or some sort of challenge when it comes to leveraging and empowering innovation inside your firms so that you can power your businesses forward.
The concept of matching in cloud is something we are very closely following. It is extremely important to use emerging technology in our businesses, but what is equally important is to see what technology we are putting in place to ensure that customers can trust the markets to put orders and trades in the cloud. It will bring markets together, it will bring markets closer, but trust is still the most important element of emerging technologies. And this brings me to the next topic of today, which is about trust. It might sound a little paradoxical, but the core ingredient of trust is vulnerability. Vulnerability does not need to be a negative thing. In this new normal, we have to learn to live with exposures to vulnerability, be it pandemic, cyber, etc., and also find opportunities and new possibilities, allowing us to safely be vulnerable. So on that, I would say that, what are your perspectives around gaining trust and exposing vulnerability in the workplace?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, it's a really interesting way of thinking about it, Tinku. So I think it's, it tees it up really in a new way of looking at trust in a more holistic format. So I think the first thing that we talk about a lot among markets is understanding each other's vulnerabilities to some degree to be able to help each other get stronger, right? So the first thing is having a network of exchanges where we have a trusting relationship, where we know that we're providing, for instance, we might be providing technology to an exchange, but they also are letting us know what kind of economic challenges they have, what kind of business challenges are they trying to overcome. We then share what things that we're working on, and then we also really share a view as to technology and what challenges are we seeing amongst our clients, what are the impediments to change among potentially our member firms, but also to the extent that we do see certain attempts within, from an IT security perspective, we share information amongst ourselves in a trusted way so that we can all get stronger together. And if we all have to sit in isolation and trying to solve some of these really big challenges on our own, we don't get the benefit of what someone may have done before us. But if we all work within a network of a trusted group of exchange operators, we can then learn from each other and make sure that those types of situations, we all get stronger together, essentially, in protecting our markets, protecting our clients, and making sure we also are driving change in a way that our clients will accept it over time. Because once they've experienced it in one market, it might be easier for them to experience it somewhere else. So that trusting network has become a big part of our relationships as a technology provider, but also as a market operator. And I think that is an example of that benefit of network effect when it comes to information sharing. So that would be one example, Tinku. But I also think that, trust, another thing that we've also seen is the use of technology as specifically the blockchain to try to create what they call, a trusted record of a transaction in what they deem a trustless society. So, for instance, you may not know, investor A doesn't know that investor B, that they're buying or selling a stock from investor B, but they don't necessarily need to know who investor B is. If there's already been work done to establish the creditworthiness of investor B, and they then have a perfect record of that transfer, and they also have an instantaneous knowledge of the transfer or the ownership and the transfer of ownership of that stock. That is a utopian world that the blockchain could potentially create across a market operator. Today, that occurs within essentially a CCP or a central counterparty clearing situation or organization, or it would occur within a settlement system. But you can also find ways to leverage the blockchain to create a trusted environment and a trustless society. And that I would say that blockchain today has been more applicable to new markets, not so much established players, but those that are creating markets in a brand new setting. Potentially, for instance, a market, we have a market operator that's building a market to trade fractionalized real estate interests. And in that particular case, I think that number one, a cloud-enabled market is top priority. Number two, looking at how to create settlement in a blockchain setting is something that they're very focused on as well, so that they can create that trusted network without having to establish a whole CCP type of structure. So those are the types of technologies that can create trust, but there's always the human interaction and the information sharing that also creates trust. And I think both of those things are in full force in the exchange world.
That kind of, completes the various things that we wanted to talk about. But with you on stage, I felt something more important is there to address, which is really the thought around women in technology. Technology is actually a place that is extremely exciting to work these days, but despite that, the diversity concern remains to be a global issue. And I really felt that with your career, it will be a very good example for many of our women audience here to understand from you what does it take to really put family and career in the similar footing, and how Adena is as a mom.
Well, first of all, Tinku, I think that you are also a great example. So we should recognize that you've also found a way to, manage a wonderful family while you're also managing an incredible career. So I think that it's great to have you as a colleague and someone that I can compare notes with over time. But I would say that my experience has actually been a very positive one in the industry. I started in the industry in 1993 and quickly had children. So I had children at a fairly young age and early in my career. So by the time I was 30, I had 2 children and a budding career within Nasdaq, actually. So, I've been within Nasdaq most of my career. And the keys to success, in my opinion, number one, are a great partner in life. So my husband and I really have been partners throughout the entire experience. And I spent a few years working part-time. He actually spent a few years working part-time And so we found a way to find that right balance between the two of us. I also had an incredible boss. I had several incredible bosses actually, but very early when the children were young, my manager was flexible. He first of all let me work part-time for a period of time, but he also promoted me twice in those early years, and actually both times I happened to be pregnant. So he was very willing to find a path to accept the fact that I was starting a family, but also starting my career. And he valued, me as someone who had a lot of potential. And it was clear that he was looking out for me as I was managing through those early years. And that made a huge difference because it allowed me to find that balance that I needed to have early on. But then, once the kids got a little bit older and I was able to kind of take on more responsibility, it became a lot easier for sure. There are always going to be pulls on people's time as father or mother. And it's really a matter of having a workplace that values family values, that allows for there to be some level of balance. I do think modern technology makes a huge difference in enabling particularly working moms to succeed. The dawn of the internet and the BlackBerry were early in my career. So being able to work while not sitting at my desk all the time was hugely important in terms of being able to manage some of the responsibilities I had at home. And then I would say that in general, just recognizing that honestly, COVID has given us this great recognition that people have lives outside of work. We get to see some of it, whether it's on Zoom and the kids come into a meeting or whatever the families are facing. There's a little bit more of honestly, human connection that's been created this year that I think is actually going to be highly valuable going forward in enabling there to be a conversation around balance. It can't happen every minute. I had periods in my career where I worked incredibly hard, like, double all-nighters, and it was just incredibly difficult and time-intensive projects. But there was always the recognition that if I really needed to be there to manage something at home, I didn't even have to ask. I was able to do it. And at the same time, these projects had an end, so that I would have periods of time when I was able to create more balance. And I think having that dialogue and that understanding between manager and employee, among employees and within a team, I think all of that actually has been heightened during this year. And I'm hoping going forward, it'll actually make it easier to create a more balanced situation for everyone, men and women, as they manage their family lives.
Yeah, that's actually a great thought because, one good thing about COVID is the flexibility at work, and I think that will be extremely advantageous for the women because they can actually juggle both family and work. So for the male audiences, it's also good to hear that, have to be a good boss and have to be a good partner. Just like, Adena, you say that I'm an example too, and I have both of these very good support, my boss and my partner and spouse. So that is very important and good insight for us to end today's session. So thank you very much, Adena. It was a pleasure to actually have this very heart-to-heart talk and at the same time get all these insights and content from you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Tinku. It was a pleasure. Thank you.